Welcome, Hockey Nation fans and Pucks and Dreams followers. Today is one day away from the beginning of the 2021 NHL season. My cohort, Pierre, is unavailable because I was late, so he's on another call. Hopefully he'll be able to join us part of the way through. There's a lot going on in the NHL that I just wanted to touch on. Mainly a lot of the waiver wires came out yesterday, so we're seeing a lot of players that are suddenly available for the picking, but I'm not too sure if too many will get picked up. A couple of the notable ones that are interesting to me, the one that's not really a surprise, I guess, is the Tyler Johnson waiver wire. He was previously put on waivers and nobody bit on that, so I'm guessing nobody will bite on it again this time. It seems obvious that he's kind of the odd man out in Tampa. I'm assuming in part for the length of that contract, and the value and what his role is now in Tampa, which seems to be significantly diminished. So I don't know. What do you think about the Tyler Johnson waiver wire? Will anybody pick him up? He would be a fit on a lot of teams, including maybe a Detroit that could use his offensive punch. I don't think that he is particularly well suited to playing the wing, even though he plays the wing in Tampa lately, and I think that's part of the problem. We saw his offensive production drop quite a bit, and I didn't think he was super effective in the playoffs. But I don't know if he's really diminished. I mean, he's not young. He's a 1990 birth year, so he's going to be 31 this year, and he still has quite a few years left on like a $5 million contract, and I'm sure Tampa would prefer to have the salary flexibility at this point. So what do you think about the Tyler Johnson waiver wire? Now, we're going to see a lot of players that go on the waiver wire that will still be in the mix. But, we have a very short season, 56 games, and there's a lot of back-to-back. So it's inside of a very tight number of days. So there's this taxi squad concept. So you'll see maybe players like Tyler Johnson still play games for Tampa. Maybe he ends up playing 20 or 28. Maybe he plays 56. Who knows? But again, I think if anybody picks him up, they're best served as him as a centerman. And if he's like a second-line centerman, he would be a lot better than a lot of second-line centermen in the NHL right now. I think he's still capable of, in a full season getting 20, 25 goals. And I think he's still a 30 to 40 assist guy. Like, he can still produce offensively. He's not a big guy and he's not young, but he can still be a good NHL player. I don't see any reason why he can't. I don't love him on the wing. I found he got pushed out to the boards a lot. And I think he's better when he's, playmaking and running a line. Another one that I was a little bit surprised at, and maybe I shouldn't be, I thought that, Oliver Shillington is a defenseman that I was kind of high on in Calgary. I thought he would get a top 6 role anyway, but he was put on the waiver wire. Now, again, I don't know what that means as far as their depth. We'd have to look at their depth chart to see who else is in the mix there. You've got to hope that Valimaki's in the mix because he looks, I think he's going to be a top 2 or 3D when he's healthy, and he had a rough year last year injury-wise. But I was a little bit surprised to see that Shillington's on the outs there. And again, maybe he's not totally on the outs, but if you look on their top 6 right now, they've got Mark Giordano. Let's take a quick look here who they got and their line combinations. On D, they've got Mark Giordano and Rasmus Andersson. So no surprise there. Noah Hanifin, and Chris Tanev was the offseason signing. Valimaki, to me, is going to move up in this lineup over time. He's a real good, big Finnish defenseman that played in the WHL, and I think he's got a lot of potential. What's interesting is they're slating Nikita Nesterov ahead of Shillington. So I'm kind of curious about that. So I don't know what you think about that. That might be low-key. Another interesting waiver wire was the fact that Corey Perry was put on waivers. So I don't know if this is pretty much, Corey Perry and, Matthew Perot in Winnipeg and Corey Perry in Montreal. So I don't know if, Corey Perry is just going to be on the taxi squad. We know there's actually a lot of forward depth now in Montreal. So they just signed him. I can't see him going anywhere. Michael Frolik, too, was an off-season, inexpensive signing. So both those guys on the waiver wire. And, I think what he's saying is basically because of the cap, they can only protect a certain number of players, and it allows them to keep up to 21. So I think the reality is they have so much depth on forward in Montreal and so many bodies that are capable of playing in the NHL that you're seeing two guys that they're going to risk putting on the waiver wire, and they're hoping, as it says here, Claude Julien, the coach, keep your fingers crossed that he's going to get through waivers because they want to keep both players in the mix because they think that they can both contribute during the season. So it's interesting what's going on. Tyler Johnson, Luke Schenn, I guess I'm not that surprised at. I think he's more like a 6-7 at this point in Tampa. I think Louis Erickson, no surprise there, has a really expensive contract, and he has not really been able to produce at levels that he had produced earlier in his career, which he was a very good forward for Dallas and Boston, and he's older now. I think that's just the reality of it. But they have a lot of years of contract on that, so I just don't see anybody biting on that contract. There would have to be some sort of a deal to move him off of their roster. My guess is he clears waivers. Matthew Perot, he's got 1 year left on this $16 million deal. He's a little bit weird. He's a smaller forward that's skilled. They move him to the wing a lot. I don't know how effective he is at center. And they have a lot of, young, big, talented forwards in Winnipeg. So it's probably tough for them to keep him. I'm a little surprised at that one, but he is getting up there. He's 33. But he's a pretty good player, I don't know I think, again, for him to move to another team would take a deal where someone would have to eat salary, or they'd give up, a prospect for you to take that contract. Like Winnipeg would give up a prospect. I think that would be what you would see in that scenario. Let's see. The Blue Jackets, Nathan Gerbe. I mean, again, he's kind of a bubble guy, right? So I'm not really surprised at that. I don't know. Were there any other surprises for you? I think those are the big ones that I kind of thought about too. Now, another interesting that in Chicago, Jeremy Colliton gets a 2-year extension. So I don't know what's going on. I mean, he's a young coach, hasn't had necessarily the lineup to be competitive. They've played a very fire wagon type of hockey, which is very surprising to me because that's a team that probably needs to batten down the hatches. He had success in the AHL. I'm not convinced. They did win a playoff round against Edmonton, and Edmonton should have probably beaten them. But this is going to be a rough year for Chicago. So I guess they're just doubling down on the young coach and give him a chance to continue to grow. He took over from a pretty historic coach in Joel Quenneville. But, I mean, the way that they're going right now, they're a little ways from being competitive. They're not going to have Kirby Dach. They're not going to have Nylander. They're not going to have Jonathan Toews, their captain. We know Brent Seabrook's probably done and Andrew Shaw's done, and they don't really have goaltending. Corey Crawford signed in New Jersey and then retires. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Rosters need to be set tonight. Not really. I think that they're saying that I don't quite understand it, to be honest with you. I think you can protect. I thought they were going to increase it to 25, but I think then there's still a contract limit of because normally I think it's 23 players you can protect or 21, and then they increased it by 2 or 3. So there will be a taxi squad scenario, but then there's still the cap. So teams are having to comply with the cap. So by putting players on the wire, that'll give them some salary cap relief. So as far as the absolute number of players, I think that has increased. Let's see. So they're allowed to dress 20 still, 18 skaters, 2 goalies. The 23-player active roster I thought was going to increase, but maybe that's my imagination. Because I thought they were going to increase it to 20. Let's see, to 25. I'm not sure. I probably need to do a little research on that. Tweaks to, oh, there are tweaks to roster sizes. Let's see, blah, 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 taxi squad roster. Every team will play with a 23-player roster, and they have to have the cap of 81.5 prorated because they're not going to actually pay that out. Those players will practice. So then they'll have 4 to 6 players on a taxi squad. Wow, that's way bigger. Those players will practice a team, potentially travel, and if they're on a two-way deal, they can make their full minor league salaries unless they're activated in the NHL roster. So they can still only have 23 people on the roster, but then they have this flex roster, I think, where these 4 to 6 guys won't have to clear waivers beyond this point. So it's kind of interesting. I have to think about that a little bit. So a good question, Michael, as usual. Let's see. What else do we got going on? The Mike Hoffman signing. So I don't know what you think. Oh, this is interesting. Willie O'Ree, who was the first black player in the NHL, and he's really a great ambassador to hockey, and he continues to be involved in trying to promote hockey in the U.S. inner cities and to minority communities, and just a real gentlemanly guy and great person if you've ever met him. The Boston Bruins are going to retire his number 22. So I think that's a nice gesture. I think that's a pretty impactful thing. He's kind of like the Jackie Robinson of hockey is the way they describe it, where he broke that color barrier. And what was interesting is he played with one bad eye. Like, he was blind, I believe, in the one eye. So who knows how good he could have been if he wasn't blind. Kind of crazy when you think about it, especially like how fast the game is. And they didn't wear helmets then. So, but that's kind of a nice gesture by Boston. Interesting, Beaumeister has moved on from his career. So we know the story of Jay Beaumeister is that he had that cardiac arrest on the bench in February. And, they went on to win the cup, but he has not played. So I think this was expected. We wish him the best. His contract ended. I just don't think he's medically capable of continuing his career. Mike Hoffman, who signed a PTO, which was a really bizarre move, a player tryout with St. Louis. And Coach Frenchie, I just think the deals that he was getting offered were not, palatable to him. So he finally, finally signs a 1-year deal for $4 million. It's going to be prorated like everybody else's contract. So I don't know if they pay him 70% of that. Here's a guy that has scored 6 20-goal seasons in a row, but 5-on-5, not the most amazing player. Power play, he's lethal. So he should help St. Louis, who could really use the scoring. St. Louis is a weird team for me. Just the departure of Alex Pietrangelo and how that went down, and the Falk contract. I'm really excited to see Ryan O'Reilly as the captain. Questions, I think, still in net about Binnington, and then Hoffman will give them some offensive punch. But for me, he's just a strange player. But I think he'll fit well. He's a strange player for St. Louis because they play a very physical, heavy style of game. And I don't think that's his game. He's a power play specialist. So I think they're probably making an exception or an adjustment there for him to fit in that lineup. I think the contract is probably a lot less than he thought he would have gotten. Normally, you would think a guy that scores 29 goals consistently or 25 goals consistently is going to get $6-7 million. We know that there was drama with his significant other and Erik Karlsson that led to the implosion of the Ottawa Senators. And now we see Erik Karlsson in San Jose. We see Mark Stone still, playing at a very, very high level, probably a top 15 player in Las Vegas. And so it's interesting to see Hoffman went to Florida, now in St. Louis. It was weird that Florida didn't bring him back, but I guess the new GM decided that wasn't a fit. So, yeah, interesting signing. It'll be curious to see how he does. I have to anticipate he'll be a big goal scorer for them as long as they utilize him on the power play. And with Vladimir Tarasenko out, they're going to need the goals. So this is going to be a real important signing for them. I don't think there was anyone else that had that capability of being such a consistent offensive producer, albeit on the power play. But their power play will definitely hurt, in my opinion, without Tarasenko. So adding Hoffman probably really helps them out. So the only other interesting note, let's see, it was the Zibanejad had COVID and could miss the opener as he recovers, but it sounds like he's doing all right. So Mika Zibanejad, the number one centerman in New York with the Rangers. No real notable signings in the last few days. Freddie Gauthier and Clayson signed, $700,000 contracts. We mentioned Mike Hoffman, Jesper Bratt, we already talked about, and Del Zotto and Barzal. Andy Green's contract officially comes on the books at $700,000. So I think that's pretty good for the Islanders. I mean, good signing. He played reasonable minutes for them. He's a veteran guy. He's older. He's former captain of the New Jersey Devils. So that's probably helpful for them depth-wise, and maybe he plays a top six role. Matt Martin, we know, got a 4-year, $1.5 million deal. Feels a little bit rich, but he fits into that team. So I don't know if there's anything else really to talk about as far as the waiver wire. There's the only other thing I'll note, which I guess is not a surprise because he's hurt once again, and it's unfortunate for me, and it's more just a personal thing. Keep an eye on Evgeny Svechnikov. He, again, has had well-documented injury problems for the Detroit Red Wings, and he is on the waiver wire. And the only reason I mention this is he was a pretty high draft pick. He was a 20th overall draft pick in the first round. Big guy, trains very hard, worked very hard to come back from injury, and then almost like the first time he hits the ice gets hurt again. And I don't know what the nature of the injury is, but we haven't seen much of him. The reason I say keep an eye on him is his brother is Andrei Svechnikov, who's the star in Carolina, himself coming off of an injury. But I think those brothers are very, very close, and they would like to play together. Will Carolina snatch up the other Svechnikov? It will be interesting to see, because I still think that he's capable. He's more than capable of playing in the NHL. He can play either wing. He's 6'3", 220-pound guy with skill, and he plays a heavy game. He's not always consistent, and I think he's very tentative because he keeps getting hurt. He had a major, major knee injury, and he's had major – I think he broke his leg before. I can't remember. He had another crazy injury before that. So it's really unfortunate. I really like the guy. I think he's very determined, but his body keeps rebelling. But it'd be interesting to see, does Carolina pick him up, and then uniting the Svechnikovs, does that turn his fate around? I would hope so, because I really had hopes that he would be on the Detroit roster this year, but doesn't look like that's going to happen. It looks like he'll be, well, at the very least, he's on the taxi squad. All right, well, I'm going to wrap it up today. It's quick and dirty here. What sort of roster moves were you surprised by, other ones we mentioned? If you're on YouTube, hit like and subscribe. I know we're supposed to tell people that. Our YouTube channel could use some love for Hockey Nation. On Pucks and Dreams, I think we're up to just under 3,000 people, so that's great. Keep subscribing there, and look out for our daily show where we talk about what's going on in the NHL, prospects, expansion, all the different topics of the day. Tomorrow is day one of the NHL season. So if you look quickly, we've got Pittsburgh versus Philadelphia. Let's see if there's a good way to see this. Pittsburgh will play the Philadelphia Flyers in their opener at 5:39 Eastern. The classic Toronto Maple Leafs versus Montreal Canadiens matchup. Chicago Blackhawks, who are going to be very, very, I think, in tough this year. They're going to have a lot of problems. But maybe some players will emerge out of that. I don't know, but I think they have problems at every position pretty much. They will play the Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning, who do not have any depth this year. It's actually Chicago. Maybe they should pick up Tyler Johnson and Oliver Shillington. Can you pick up two guys off the waiver wire? You should pick up both of them. Chicago, if you're smart, you should pick up both those guys. The Vancouver Canucks, who I thought had a wonderful year last year, but I think they might – the Nate Schmidt pickup was actually probably an upgrade over Chris Tanev, in my opinion. I think they get a little bit weaker in goal, but Hope not much. The Holtby signing should help that, and we see Thatcher Demko's a real good goalie. So maybe Canucks will be good. I think Canucks will still be very, very strong against the Edmonton Oilers, who I think made some really smart moves with limited cap space. So I'm excited to see the Oilers against Canucks. And then the Blues versus the Avalanche. The Blues are going to be interesting to me without Alex Pietrangelo. was watching some of their training camp scrimmages, and they look like they're high tempo, but who knows, right? Like Torrey Krug is an NHL veteran. He's a real good defenseman, but he's not Alex Pietrangelo. I really like the Colorado Avalanche. I think that this is a team that I'm hoping will contend for the Stanley Cup. My over-under for Chicago, oh my God, in 28 games? Man, this could be rough. They're missing a lot. Do they get 15 wins? I don't know, in 56 games? Yeah, did I say 28? 56. They're not going to get 28 wins. I mean, I've got to think that they're 15, 20 wins if they're lucky. Like, they're really missing their captain in Taves, which I don't really even understand what's going on there. Their goaltending is significantly weaker. Like, you're relying on Malcolm Subban, who's a career sub 900 save percentage goalie, and a backup. Now it's a shortened year, so maybe that'll help a little bit. And the other kid is Chris. Is it Delia? Not to be confused with Chris D'Elia, the comedian. But I think it's very unproven and kind of weak in net. And then in D, like, I don't know, man. Do they get 15 wins? And it's not a great year to finish last. Although there's a lot of defensemen, and they could probably use the defensemen. So if Dylan Strome is your number one center and your number two center is Pius Suter, you're in trouble. I really like Kubalik. I think Alex DeBrincat will have a big year. Brandon Peary, we know, is not an everyday NHL player. They have Andrew Shaw. Is he playing? I thought he was out. Is he back? On D, I mean, Duncan Keith, and then there's everybody else. I really like Adam Bachfest, but who's Ian Mitchell? Connor Murphy is okay, but he's not a top two defenseman. He's more like a 4-5 in my opinion. Like, Calvin DeHaan is perennially injured. Like, this guy's always hurt, and Zadorov's just like a little bit erratic. But if he's on, maybe a shortened season helps him. They're missing a lot down here. Kirby Dach, I think, is going to be a legit NHL number one centerman. He's big, he's talented, he's mature. You know, a little quirky at times in his communication stuff, but I think he's just a very, very serious young guy. And Taves, I don't understand what's going on there, but he's out. The goaltending is really painful to me. Colin Delia, that's it. Not Chris D'Elia, the comedian. And Malcolm, I mean, look at it. His rating is 63. That is not an aberration. Like, there's so many backups that are better than him. So I don't know. I think they're in tough. Because we know they don't play great defense, and now they don't have defense, and now they don't have forwards. They're a mess. I think Michael says he thinks that they're going to get 18 wins. I don't know about that. How? Who are they going to beat? Detroit's got real goaltending. You going to play Detroit? I don't know who they even play. I have to look at that division, but I think that they're in trouble. And the NHL draft is weird. Like, the NHL draft is a lot of defensemen at the top and not a lot of high-end player like forwards. I do like the defensemen. So let's see. Are they playing all interdivisional? Carolina going to be super deep. They'll destroy them. Columbus is a little weird, but they're still deep and they're really well coached. The Dubois situation will be interesting to watch. Dallas, we know, made to the final. Detroit's way improved in net. I think they're in tough against Detroit. Now, Detroit's not going to be able to score goals. I think they're going to have a real hard time scoring goals again this year. I don't see anything that changes that. They'll improve on D and they'll improve in net. Maybe that's a good matchup for them because they do have still some firepower that Detroit doesn't have. But Thomas Greiss looks excellent. Like, he looks really good in Detroit. And, you know, their best days are in the future because they're missing Sider and they're missing Raymond, as in they're not ready. They're not going to play yet. So maybe that's a matchup. I think Florida could be weaker. Nashville's going to be strong. Tampa's a monster. So maybe, they'll pick up wins against, could they beat Florida, Detroit? I think they're going to have a hard time against everybody else on any given night. They're going to be in rough shape. I think it's going to be tough. I don't know. We're going to find out. They were one of my favorite teams for a long time, but they just, for the last number of years, I just don't think I think they've been adding pieces to rebuild, but then they kind of gutted that. And I know some of that's due to the salary cap and the inflexibility they have. They moved on they don't have Brandon Saad, who they had last year. They don't have Corey Crawford. They don't have Taves. Kirby Dach was looking amazing in the playoffs. Like, he looked legit. He was playing 18 minutes a game for a reason. So he's out. Nylander is talented but not consistent. So I don't know. Do they get 15 or 18? I would be shocked. But you never know. It's the NHL and there's a lot of parity. But I just think that they're significantly weaker. And then if you look at the NHL draft that's coming up, it's a weird one to me. There's good players. Like Owen Power, Brant Clark, if you got either of those guys, they're legit top 2 defensemen at some point. I don't know about Edmondson. I have not seen him, and I don't know if he played for them at the World Juniors. I don't think he did. Carson Lambos is real good. I don't know if he's that high. I don't think he's that high. Kent Johnson's really talented. We drafted him in Everett. Never came. He went NCAA route. But he's a real good player. But is he normally top 6? I'm not sure about that. He's killing it in Michigan, but they're a very deep team. That's a crazy team in Michigan. Gunther's real good, I think, for Edmonton. He's like the Edmonton Oil Kings. He's really good. Benners we saw. But is he an offensively impactful guy? I don't know. And he's an overager. Eklund we didn't get to see because he missed the World Juniors, but he's real talented. Wallstead, to me, that's who you get if you're Chicago. This guy's so good. He's what you want Askarov to be. Aduraddy's dropped, but I don't see why. He played real well, but maybe he doesn't have the flash and dash, but he's a real good player, but I don't think he's a number 1 center. He's more like, you would get him and eventually be like a number 2. And Chaz Lucius had really bad injury problems, but he's super talented. So I don't know. It's a weird draft. You don't see like a superstar at the top like a Lafreniere, but there's some real good players. So it's a weird year to finish last. All right, well, I'm going to jump off. Have you and Coach picked top 4 in the Cup winner yet? No, we haven't done that. We were supposed to do that today, but unfortunately I was a little bit late and Pierre jumped on another call. So we'll probably do that tomorrow is my guess. Who do you have? Top 4. I have to really think about that. My hope is that Colorado is in the mix for the Cup. I think they will be if they're healthy. Last year they were not healthy. It'd be something if Edmonton suddenly popped through. That'd be great. Be like, redemption. And Connor McDavid needs a Cup too, just so does Nathan McKinnon. I think it's hard to discount Vegas. I really believe Alex Pietrangelo is on a mission to shove it down St. Louis's throat. And knowing him, he's a very focused, determined guy. And I think he willed that team last time and led that team to a Cup. And I think there's got to be some weird animosity there for them not to sign him. Something weird going on. It doesn't make sense why you would not keep an Alex Pietrangelo, your captain, top 5 or 8 NHL defenseman. You keep that guy. I don't know. I think he's going to be on a mission. I think Mark Stone's always on a mission, and I think Vegas can be real dangerous. I don't know. Tampa's still in the mix. Tampa's still so deep. And you never know with Philadelphia. Carter could help them out, and they got a lot of depth. I don't think Giroux's the guy you count on anymore, but I think this is Konechny's team and Couturier's team and Provorov's team, and that's probably a good thing. So I don't know. Those are teams that I think will be in the mix. We'll take a closer look at it tomorrow. Good question again. I'm going to sign off here, so like and subscribe on our Hockey Nation YouTube channel if you can. It could use a lot of love, and I think we put out pretty good content there. Like and subscribe on the Pucks and Dreams YouTube and on our Facebook group. And we will see you tomorrow, which is day 1 of the 2021 shortened NHL season.